Part 1. The Man in a Hurry. And the Price of a Closed Heart. There was a man named Rise who lived in a small village, yet carried in him the urgency of someone always racing time. People said he was wealthy, clever, and sharp-minded, but no one ever said he was warm. Rise believed in only one thing. The slower you are, the more you get entangled with others, and the more they drag you down. He never greeted his neighbors, never made small talk, never stopped to help unless there was a guaranteed benefit. In his mind, kindness was a luxury for the idle. Every day he ran between meetings, ran across projects, ran from conversations that didn't yield measurable returns. And then, one scorching afternoon, as sunlight poured like fire onto the earth, he was walking home from the market with a heavy bag. At the edge of his land, beneath the shade of an old mango tree, he saw a stranger resting. It was a traveler, drenched in sweat, face weary, but wearing a gentle smile. "Brother," the man asked, "I've been walking all morning. Could I have a mango?" Rise paused for exactly 1 second, looked at the man and muttered, like spitting into the wind, "Pick it yourself." He turned and walked away, leaving the man behind, hungry and burning in the heat. A few days later, on a cool morning, Rise returned home to find a bag of ripe mangoes lying beneath the same tree. No one around, no note left behind. He picked one up, took a bite, and was stunned. It was exquisitely sweet. For the first time in his life, he paused to savor a taste that money couldn't buy. Simple, pure, as if this fruit had been grown solely for him that day. He looked up at the tree and noticed a line carved into its bark. "What you give today will return when the time is right." Rise laughed aloud. "I didn't give anyone anything, yet here I am, still receiving." He tossed the mango into his bag and walked off, convinced he had just outwitted some ancient law with simple proof. Years passed. Rise grew even wealthier. He bought more land, built storage barns, erected a tall house with steel gates and security cameras. As his house grew taller, so did his voice, and his laughter faded. Workers feared him. Family distanced themselves. His heart became a desert, tiled with imported marble. No one invited him to weddings. No one visited for New Year, and he didn't care. Time is gold, he thought. Feelings are unprofitable. What must come comes at last. One year, a great drought struck. The rains vanished. Wells dried up. Fields cracked open. Crops withered. Villagers bent their backs over broken soil, pleading with the sky. But Rise wasn't worried. His grain stores were full. When people came knocking, begging for help, he turned them all away. "If I could earn this, so can they. No handouts." He locked his granaries, hired guards, felt not the slightest tremor in his chest, until the old mango tree began to shed its leaves. Golden leaves fell, branches grew brittle. No fruit came. The garden soil cracked open like wounds. Rice refused to sprout. The orchard bore nothing, despite fertilizers, irrigation, and experts. Nothing worked. The land, like a body betrayed, refused to give. Rise began to worry, but he didn't yet understand. It wasn't the land that had died. It was what he had sown, finally blooming. Part 2. The Face of Karma. When there's no one left to blame. Rise stood on the cracked earth, his dry hands clutching a fistful of dust, as if trying to pull back something already lost. But the harder he gripped, the clearer it became. He had sown the wrong seeds all his life. The mango tree that once stood lush like a soul rooted in the land was now broken and bare. No birdsong, no shade. Like an old friend turning away in silence. He called engineers, hired feng shui masters, offered rituals to appease the stars. But they only nodded, shook their heads, and left, as if they sensed something deeper in the soil, something he could not see. That night, sitting alone on the porch, he heard the wind slip through the doorframe like a whisper from someone unseen. It's not that you did wrong. It's that you did nothing. The next morning, with sunken eyes, Rhys walked to the home of the village's wisest elder, a man of few words, but each one heavy like a whetstone. He didn't greet him, just sat down and asked, "I haven't done anything bad, so why has everything turned its back on me?" The old man looked at him. No blame, no smile. Just rested his hand on his cane and said, "It's because you did nothing. You did nothing good, helped no one when they needed it, gave nothing when you could, and now when you need others, there's no one left." Rhys froze. "But I worked hard. I didn't steal from anyone." Not stealing doesn't mean you contributed. Not harming doesn't mean you lived kindly. You lived as if this world were a launching pad for you alone. You planted trees, but watered no one but yourself. That sentence struck him like a spade digging deep into the dry soil of his heart. And then came the memories, the face of the weary traveler he once dismissed like an irrelevant breeze, the neighbors he never greeted, the hungry villagers he turned away like stray dogs, even with a full warehouse behind him. Rhys bowed his head. For the first time in years, he was silent not out of pride, but out of shame. He returned home late in the day. The wind was still dry, the land still cracked, the house still cold. But for the first time, Rhys didn't ask, "Why me?" Instead, he thought, "I should have been different." No one witnessed that moment. No horns of repentance. Just one lonely man finally sitting with himself. That night, he didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling as waves of memory rolled in, opportunities missed, people who turned away, faint voices he had pretended not to hear. He didn't cry, but his heart softened, like soil after the first rain. Dawn of a new man. The next morning, Rhys opened the granary doors, a place no one had ever been allowed into. He called the villagers, said little, simply pointed at the sacks of rice. One bag for each family, no payment needed. People looked at one another in disbelief. Some thought he'd gone mad. But when they saw his eyes, no longer cold, no longer rushed, they understood. This wasn't charity. It was redemption. He hired workers to dig a new well for the village, set up water troughs for the animals, donated money to the clinic for medicine. No banners, no name plaques, no desire to be remembered. And then, one day, as he walked past the old, dead mango tree, he saw a tiny green sprout growing beside it. No one had planted it, no one had watered it, but it was there, like a quiet affirmation from the earth. You have begun to sow again. Part 3. The Seedling of Redemption. When karma begins to breathe again. The old mango tree was dead, but the new sprout still grew, tiny, green, trembling in the wind, but resilient. Rhys stood silently before it for a long time. He didn't touch it, didn't water it right away. He simply bowed his head and whispered, "I don't deserve this, but thank you for giving me another chance." The once cracked land began to change. Not a sudden flood of green, but the burnt smell in the soil faded. The wind became less dry, and even the wild weeds, which he once ordered uprooted, now became the first signs that the earth was healing. Since the morning he opened the granary, they began to come back, one by one. At first, just a few children asking for water. Then a widowed woman brought him a bottle gourd. Someone else came with a basket of eggs. Someone quietly swept the trash from his gate without saying a word. No debts, no expectations. But something was returning. Something that all the wealth in the world couldn't buy. Trust. Children who once avoided his eyes now waved when he passed. The man he once drove away from his rice store now bowed in quiet respect as he received a new sack of grain. No one brought up the past. No one held grudges. Perhaps because everyone was thirsting for healing too. Rise no longer woke at dawn to check ledgers. Now, he rose to watch the sun. He pulled weeds with his own hands, dug wells, carried water to the buffalo. No one told him to. No one paid him. He simply wanted to. Villagers began to say, "He's changed." But Rice didn't change for anyone's approval. He lived as if he had just awoken from a long sleep. And now every breath was an apology to life itself. One afternoon, he sat beneath the tree, the very spot where the traveler once asked him for a mango. He looked at the small sprout and quietly asked, "If I had given you just one mango that day, how different would everything have been?" No answer came, but the breeze was cooler, the air gentler, and in his heart, he knew the question mattered more than the answer, because now he was asking it with a heart that truly felt remorse. A year later, the young mango tree had grown past his knees. Rice fields began to turn green again. Birds returned to nest. People often say, "Blessings are like planting trees. You sow today and wait a lifetime for fruit." But Rise knew better than anyone. Sometimes just one right act, from a heart truly repentant, is enough for the earth to open up again. Not because he was better than others, but because he had finally stopped and looked at himself. Part 4. The fruit isn't for eating, but for remembering. 3 years after the land cracked and died, the young mango tree now stood shoulder high. Its leaves were thick, its trunk sturdy, its branches spread wide like a hand that had learned how to hold. And then, one summer morning, as Rise carried a bucket of water to the garden, he froze. Amid the fresh green leaves, a golden cluster of ripe mangoes quietly hung. No bells, no fireworks, just a silent offering, the first sweet fruit from a man who once gave nothing at all. He didn't pick them. He just stood there, gazing at them for a long time, as if the mangoes weren't just fruit, but a letter from life itself, whispering, "I saw. I received." Rise's house was no longer a fortress. The gates stayed open all day. Children came in asking for water. The elderly stopped by to sit beneath the shade of the mango tree. No one feared him, but everyone respected him, not for his wealth, but for his way of living. He no longer chased time. He walked with it, no longer checking rice inventories each morning, but counting how many people smiled that day. Sometimes, he would quietly sit beneath the mango tree, the very spot where he once refused a thirsty, hungry stranger. That man may no longer be around. But Rise remembered. And each time a mango fell, he would gently pick it up, wipe it clean, and place it in a basket, not to eat, but to give to anyone who needed it more than he did. Karma isn't a punishment, it's a mirror. Many still think of karma as a sentence handed down from the heavens, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But Rise knew. Karma doesn't punish. It reflects. It doesn't yell. It doesn't threaten. It simply returns what we've given, in a different form, at a time we least expect. It could be a look from a child you once ignored. It could be indifference from others when you're in need. It could be a mango, not growing because you deserved it, but because, at last, you learned the lesson life had been trying to teach. And in the end, when one person changes, everything can change. One early morning, the old wise man, the one who had once held up a mirror to Rise's life, passed by the house. He sat on the stone bench beneath the mango tree, and Rise poured him a cool glass of water. "It seems the land has forgiven you," the old man said. Rise didn't respond. He just smiled and pointed to the golden mangoes above. "It's not the land that forgave me. It's me who finally learned how to say sorry." Rise never became a saint. He didn't build a temple. He gave no sermons. He simply became an ordinary man who knew how to give how to slow down, and how to listen to the call he had long ignored because he didn't have time. And maybe that's the most beautiful kind of awakening. Because sometimes what the world needs isn't perfect people, but those who once lost their way and had the courage to turn back and plant again a single mango tree.